Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And we are back, and we're moving now into our second conversation on courtesy Fulltech Systems. Of course, this is our COVID-19 update. Now, the conversation is definitely going to be one to reckon with. We have in with us Ishel Put, who is actually the Executive Director of the National Aging Council. Now, what's the conversation about? COVID-19 did, in fact, affect us greatly, affected the elderly. Ishel, good morning and welcome.
Hi, good morning, John. Good morning, Marlene. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys as always.
It's great to have you. So let's just jump right into it. As the National Aging Council, with the responsibility of looking at our elderly population, what do you think, beyond the severe symptoms of COVID and the loss of life we've seen, what do you think are some of the impacts to our elderly population that we haven't been paying attention to?
Well, I think COVID has really changed the way we all live our lives.
Yeah.
As you said before, with older persons, it is definitely a case of them being more impacted. If you would look at the statistics, 69% of all our deaths are people 60 and older who are older persons. So it's definitely a high risk of mortality. But what has also happened to older persons is that a lot of the support networks and support systems that have been in place over the years have really kind of collapsed in. And so older persons are left with very little of their support system or the ability to socialize as they used to before.
Yeah.
We also look at the case of where we have lost a lot of older people to COVID-19, and the way that we mourn, the way that we grieve, the way that we recover from loss is completely different. So you have older people who have lost friends, who have lost family members, and have been unable to grieve and reach out in the way that they have been used to. And so that creates in and of itself its own stressors. And then older persons becoming isolated, their centers not being able to be open, not being able to congregate in churches as they were used to before, not being able to visit as they were used to before. Simple things, going to the market, activities that were previously kind of a hub for everyday living have changed drastically for older persons. And so there is definitely higher cases of isolation, depression, and older people having compromised health. And then of course that exposes how fragile the health of some older persons are after the pandemic set in and lockdown measures and older people being isolated, living by themselves. We also saw families having to take on larger roles as caregivers for older people who were previously very independent and able to do many things for themselves. So look at all of those things that have changed. And of course, there's also changes in economic situations. I know we've talked about before on Open Your Eyes that about 61% of our population doesn't have any pension income. So you have older people who depend on day-to-day commerce, and that all evaporated, and they didn't necessarily fit into any of the categories for unemployment. And we also look at older persons being impacted by the way everything has become digital. You know, you need to log in, you need to fill out an online form. How many older people actually have social media? How much of the messaging is actually reaching them? How many things can they really access now when previously they were able to do things on their own? And so those are some of the challenges that have really left older persons kind of out on a limb.
That's a lot.
Yes, beyond the health challenge in and of itself, the social challenges and implications have been vast for older people.
For me, I think one of the two things that I identified, one was clearly the risks for older people, but also we've always discussed how social integration is difficult for the aging population. And then we went into this hyper-protective mode where, you know, they couldn't see grandkids, they couldn't have physical touch with people, they weren't allowed to go places that they used to be able to go before. What's your advice to families about how to navigate this type of protective behavior in a safe way where it doesn't just add to the burden that the elderly person may be feeling?
Well, one of the things that we do recommend for families to do is to find ways to interact with older people continuously. And that has really brought us into making more phone calls, being involved in video calling. And we find that older persons are interested, they're willing to learn. Their challenge is that they don't always have patient teachers. So definitely exercise patience with older people. I know we often hear about, we have to be have patience with children because their school situation has changed. They have been able to see their friends in a very real way. That is the same thing that's happening to older people. So how can we, now that things are starting to open up, now that there is a vaccine available, what are some simple things that we can do to help our older people? If there is a park in your neighborhood where there is seating and it's open air, take your older person out to a park. Have them sit down. It can be as simple as coordinating with one of their friends to make sure that they're there at the same time and they sit at a safe distance and talk. Have them engaged in, if they're watching their favorite television show, have someone sit and watch a television show along with them, provide them with company, and kind of bring back simple things that we weren't necessarily paying attention to. And of course, being mindful of the amount of time that the older person in your life is spending locked up indoors. One of the things we noticed early on is that older persons would opt to stay inside. I want to stay inside. I don't want to go outside. Outside is now a scary place. And that even translated into maybe not wanting to go out into their yard. So something as simple as being able to go into your yard and walking around, which means that if you have a yard that needs cleaning, somebody needs to actively pay attention to cleaning, making sure there's a walkway, there's a path that the older person can come out. So how many days has your older person actually been outside? During the course of this week, has your older person touched base with any of their friends, any of the people that they normally speak to? This can be a regular phone call, this can be a video call, but have they spoken to someone that they normally speak to or they would like to speak to? So, and we also see that there are little avenues or small little instances of neglect that sometimes impact older persons that we don't necessarily consider neglect because we are at different levels of independence. So if you have an older person that has been asking you for 3 or 4 days to help them make a phone call and you haven't had time to do that, that is a form of neglect. If you have an older person who's been asking you to get something for them that they are physically unable to do or afraid to go and do at this time. I run out of Vicks, somebody please go to shop and buy me some Vicks. And you ask for 2-3 days for somebody get you some Vicks and nobody have time. Those are small instances of neglect that create barriers for the older person. Because imagine how vulnerable you feel when you don't have the power to do something for yourself and the people that you are asking to do it, even though it's something simple.
Especially Vicks.
Time to do it.
Especially Vicks, because no matter what we think about it, if the elderly person in your family feels it's something to help keep them safe, that's critical to their own feelings.
Right, and the Vicks thing, the Vicks thing is really because sometimes we don't think that it's important. I will get you your Vicks. Monday come, you still not get the Vicks. Tuesday come, you still not get the Vicks. Wednesday come, you still not get the Vicks. Maybe by Friday you get the Vicks, but in that time, the toll that it can take on the mental health of the older person.
But Ishel, and I've heard of and I'd like for you to address this if possible. I've heard of anti-vaxxers actually keeping their grandparents in to not get the vaccine, even though they would want it. Have you heard of it, or have you heard of anything? And what would be your advice to these people?
So vaccination and older persons is very important. It's something that we have been pro-vaccine. We have been sharing. We work along with the coordination committee for the country with vaccination and older persons, simply because of what the coronavirus does to older people. And we've had it both ways. The older persons who are resisting and older persons who want to take the vaccination. for the most part, we would like to remind families that older people are capable of making and have the right to make decisions in regards to their health care. Um, if there is an older person who is listening and they would like to get vaccinated and they're having some resistance from their family, they can contact us at the council and we can see how we can network with our partners on the ground to have them taken to a vaccination site and receive their vaccine. We have seen reluctance from some older people with the vaccine because there has been a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
And while younger people might be able to sift through a lot of the noise on social media, the more fantastic things that we hear about the vaccine, sometimes those things are fed to older persons from people that they consider to be knowledgeable about a topic, and that creates barriers for themselves. We also saw barriers with older persons early on where they were the only ones being vaccinated in a household, and they would tell you, well, I want to get vaccinated, but what about my daughter? Yeah. What about my son? What about my grandkids who have to go back to school? So now that the vaccination sites are open, we've actually seen more older people being able to respond because they're able to go with their families. Yeah. And we also know that older people prefer to go to vaccination sites with someone. You have to remember that in the initial stages, the entire idea of the vaccine, COVID-19, everything was very scary, very new, very novel. And to go into a facility, to go into any place that you're not certain what's going to happen, you're not 100% sure what they might ask you, even though the process is very simple and easy. And I believe Ministry of Health has done an excellent job at making that process easy. It was always easier to have somebody go with the older person.
Yeah.
Just, accompanying them. But we would like to remind families that older people are capable of making their own decisions, and it is their right to make their own decisions regarding their health care. And we also want to encourage families to research, reach out to knowledgeable sources, and really make the right decision when it comes to vaccination and understanding what being vaccinated means and how it provides safety and security for the entire population and the risks of not being vaccinated. So those are things that we ask families to consider in both instances.
And I think you said something so important there, and I'm glad you said it. So if someone's at home and they want to get vaccinated and they can't convince their family, you guys can be able to step in. National Aging Council, I imagine some of the social workers do, to assist with getting the elderly vaccinated.
We will do our best to network. The organizations down on the ground actually did a very excellent job at mobilizing their older people to vaccination sites, making sure that they were receiving their vaccine. We also work along with HECOPAB and some of the other actors on the ground. Nice. So we would do our best to mobilize our network so that older persons can access the vaccine. And it's also they are one of the most vulnerable populations, and at last week I believe about 50% of all older people had received their first vaccination.
Wow.
Nice.
So it's a good number, it's up there, but we are still looking for older persons. And what was recognized early on is that while we do have older people attached to organizations, we have far more older persons in communities who aren't attached, who are reliant on their families. And sometimes families themselves have challenges in regards to being able to mobilize an older person, moving them out. Sometimes it's a case of having a vaccination site placed closer to where people can access it easier.
Or have mobile clinics
that we got.
Sorry, I was saying, or they could have mobile clinics going out. Just one final question for me. It's talking about the stories you get from the elderly who have now been fully vaccinated. I know I have my personal experience. It's just a great sigh of relief when you're elderly, my mom in this case has received his second vaccination, and you can feel comfortable being around them again, not putting them at risk. What's the story from the other side? What do you hear from the population that you work with?
Well, mostly those who have been vaccinated are looking forward to things being opened up again. They become a lot less cautious in carrying out daily activities. Not to say that they become reckless, but they become a lot less cautious in going to do simple things like paying their bills. Or maybe meeting up with other friends who have had the vaccine, like in groups of 2 or 3, and having lunch somewhere.
Wow.
So it's definitely looking at reclaiming their life. You know, they start talking about when can we get together, what are things that we can do, and even still reaching out to other older persons. You'll be surprised how many older people actually do that advocacy work on their own, talking to their peers who have not been vaccinated about why haven't you been vaccinated, what are the benefits of being vaccinated, and their own experience with the vaccine. And we also find that that is very helpful when an older person will tell you, well, girl, I know I can and I get my vaccine and it's easy, I only be there for 20 minutes, you know, it hurt me a bit for a day, I never get no fever. And those personal experiences go a long way with other older people who are still making up their mind, because we do have older people who are still uncertain that it's something they want to do, and we probably still have older people who won't take the vaccine. But the influence, the positive influence that the vaccine has on the lives of the older people who have actually taken it, it really can't be measured.
Michelle, you know, we're so grateful to get the information from you. 50% you say, and you're looking for higher numbers of elderly who have been vaccinated.
Oh yes, to get that first jab.
All right. Sure, go ahead. Final words are yours, Michelle.
Well, I think one of the things that I really want to encourage families to do, it's something that the council has been working on, and I hope that I can come on and talk to you guys about that on another time, is digital literacy and older people. Getting older people connected and looking at how they can be more independent and more empowered. On the screen, we have a graphic of a survey that the NCA had done via Facebook, and we had 200 plus respondents. And last week, we actually finished our final module of digital literacy for older persons that we did in collaboration with CITO. CITO really came on board and partnered for that. And so we've been talking to older people, we've been training them how to more effectively use their cell phone, how to get on WhatsApp, how to do video calling, but also looking at the safety of internet use for older people. How to recognize that something might be a scam, what kind of messages not to respond to. And then, of course, how to do the more practical side, internet banking, bill pay, these things, and looking at how they access services. The more things go online, the more important it's going to be for older persons and persons throughout our community, really, to know how to navigate digital devices and use digital platforms. If you really think about it, 25 years ago, we didn't really have computer classes in Belize. So you have people in their 40s who have limited experience using some of these devices. And so really looking at how we can bridge the gap, because it affects older persons, people 60 plus, but there's definitely younger people in the late 40s, early 50s who still struggle with digital literacy.
It's two realms. It's learning to use it and then learning to decipher what is fact and fiction online.
That's true. That's true.
That is so fantastic. We do hope to get you back to learn more about it. Maybe get some of the students to join in too. Ishel, we appreciate it. It was a time to put into perspective that our elderly, who we've always recognized as vulnerable, also should be taken care of emotionally, and also should be encouraged to get vaccinated and assisted to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Have a great day.
All right.
Well, we're about to take a break, but when we come back, we'll be discussing Music Week 2021. We got word that there'll be some lunch hour concerts. Now, Kim Vasquez will be telling us exactly how you could be a part of it when we come back.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.